Agus lum inniu in ifig Gael Linn an seo Shraid an Dama tá Patrick Cassidy. Conas atá tú, Patrick?
Táim go maith gur am agat, agus tá an hás orm bheith an seo live inniu san áid speisialta seo.
Fairway tá farú na fáilte róid. Agus cáhfuil tú a de hóní?
Táim I mo chónaí I Los Angeles fa fethe bliain inis, ach bím ar as go minic. Le déanaí bím ag obair an seo agus sa Europe, a bhd níos fearr nó a bhí mé hana, agus tá nín sé sin lom.
Tá ma cinse gadatni and what brings you to Ireland this time, Patrick?
Well, my mother lives here, so I come back to see her. But as I said in the previous question, I'm working quite a lot here as well. So on this trip, as well as seeing my mother, I'm travelling to Italy, where I have some meetings about my new opera that's titled Dante. It's an opera that tells the story of the great Italian poet in his own words.
And we'll get on to Dante later on. Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. Tell me about your early musical influences, Patrick.
Well, I came from a musical family, and all of my cousins played music, and it was a very, very important part of our life growing up. So I was sent to piano lessons, and also I was taught traditional music as well. So it was very unusual at that time for people to do both. But actually my cousins in the Catholic also did both. And my cousins, they were gradies, they concentrated on classical music. So it was quite unusual to do that at the time. And we were very, very caught up in the revival of Irish music, especially Sean O'Reilly's music as well at that time. And my father, although he had a chemist shop, he sold Gael Linn records and Clather records in the chemist shop on a special stand.
And that just reminds me that music has indeed curative properties, and so in a way it's oh so right.
But then he was selling this medicine.
Oh, yes. He has to make his money some way.
Well, there you go.
And tell me this, Patrick, I'm sure people watching this will be interested to know, what does an Irish composer now living in Los Angeles listen to on their smartphone? What are you listening to at the moment? If indeed you do use your smartphone.
Yes, I do. And at the moment, I'm going through a period where I'm listening to a lot of Bach cantatas. Bach's music is very inspiring. I think an awful lot of composers actually really cherish Bach as their favourite composer, and I'm one of those. And especially when I'm trying to create something new, it's very, very good to go back to basics. And even when I wrote my setting of the Latin Mass, I was listening to a lot of plain chant. It's very important to look backwards before you go forward.
For sure. And you gave a little indication earlier on about Dante. Tell us about your most recent work and how it's all progressing.
Well, Dante is an opera that with a libretto in which the entire words are Dante's own words. So Dante tells his own story through his poetry, and most people know that Dante wrote the Inferno. But that was only part of it. That was just part of La Divina Commedia. There was also the part where he went through purgatory and paradise. But in this opera, I also use an earlier work by Dante called La Vita Nuova, The New Life, where he talks about Beatrice, who he loved, and she died at an early age. Later on, when he goes through the Inferno and Purgatorio, he's going in quest of Beatrice, his lost love. So it's in a sense it's Dante's version of Orpheus in the underworld, and it's a really, really beautiful piece of poetry. I think the entire poem has about 14,000 lines, and it has been a great inspiration for artists down the years. And I believe Dante was James Joyce's greatest inspiration, in literature, and but this is the first opera, I believe, about Dante.
Well, will we all be very keen to monitor the progress and see how that opera of yours is received in June next year. And you mentioned Dante's Inferno and Dante's Purgatory. Thankfully, there is Paradise also.
And Beatrice.
Yeah, indeed. Well,
Yeah.
you're here in the Gael Linn Office in Dublin, in the heart of Dublin City. How did you come to record with Gael Linn 35 years ago?
Actually, the recording came about. I was really inspired by the Irish music revival, particularly Orethe's music, and when I was growing up. And my sister actually had a harp. She was learning the harp with the nuns in Loreto Convent, Fermoy. And so in the summertime when she was back on holidays, there was a harp in the house, so I just started playing it. And I was able to find my way around it because I was already doing the piano. And I remember when Sean Oretha started first playing Carlin's music, he used the harpsichord as a substitute. And but it inspired me, in a sense, to learn this music, and particularly Carlin's music. And then I came up with the idea of Carlin's music being arranged with a chamber ensemble in the style of Carlin's period, with the harp as a soloist instrument. And so I'd been working on this for a few years, and then I'd made some kind of just rough recordings just with the cassette tape recorder. And my brother Frank, who is now my manager, he brought in this cassette recording to Seamus O'Neill, who was head of Gael Linn Records, and Seamus liked it, and he agreed to do the record with me.
It's a wonderful, wonderful album, and I was listening to it on my own smartphone recently, and I found it, like all harp music, so dreamy and enchanting, and there is something special in the psyche of Ireland connected with the harp. Now,
It's our national instrument, of course, and it's a symbol of Ireland.
For sure.
And, all over the world, people associate that instrument with this country.
Indeed. I was lucky enough, Patrick, to be with you in the Gael Linn archives when you reached out and lifted that original master recording. How did that feel?
It felt emotional, and it was lovely to see the master tape and the vinyl album, which I hadn't seen in ages, and they were beautiful, weren't they? Those vinyl albums.
Pieces of art.
Pieces of art, yeah. And well, just being here and just being in the archive, it just brings back to me how grateful I was for the opportunity, because any artist has to start somewhere, and this really got my career going. When I recorded Gael Linn, I was working as a statistician, and so my next project was The Children of Lir, which was a really successful piece, and that kind of got me established as a composer. But Crit was instrumental in me moving on to The Children of Lir, and in fact Rob Earl helped me as well realise the premiere of The Children of Lir at that time too. So I'm very grateful to Gael Linn, and it brings back those memories and those people.
Indeed, indeed. And something, we have many giant figures connected with the history of Gael Linn. For artists and musicians, Robert McGoran has to be up there with the greats. He really, really supported so many emerging artists.
He did.
And well, tell me this, Patrick. You just mentioned that you composed a liturgical piece yourself. When you were working on your mass, Did Sean O'Reilly, was he echoing in your thoughts at that time?
Well, Sean O'Reilly's Mass, I think it was possibly one of the most successful, I think it was probably the best new Mass in the vernacular written by any composer anywhere. And because at that time, they got rid of the Latin, unfortunately, and but the idea was that there would be new music composed that would replace the plain chant. It didn't work out very well because most of this music was awful, and it sounds like it was written in the 60s or 70s. But that is the one piece that stands out today, O'Reilly's Mass, because it still had the kind of essence of plain chant, Latin plain chant, but it was in an Irish idiom. It worked beautifully, and it was an inspiring piece. My own Mass was I went back to the Latin Mass, and likewise I wanted to write something that was reflective of the tradition, of liturgical music and plain chant. But it was a slightly different thing. But it did influence me, of course it did, yes. And my Mass now, I've, as well as doing the symphonic recording, I also did with the London Symphony Orchestra. I also did a version of it for organ, and that was recorded in Los Angeles at the First Congregational Church, which actually is the largest Protestant cathedral in Los Angeles, and it was a nice home for the Irish Catholic Mass. But it was a nice thing.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
no doubt. Well, Patrick, we've already spoken of Sean O'Reilly, who arranged film scores for Gael Linn, and he's very well known for his film scores. Mm-hmm. And you also, Patrick, are very well known for your film scores. Tell me about your work on film music.
Well, there is another connection, Gael Linn connection here in a sense, because as well as the work I did maybe on Hannibal and Calvary, which are better known pieces, I also did the music on the documentary for 1916 in 2016, and in other words, this was kind of 50 years later, the documentary for the centenary, rather than the one that Gael Linn did with Sean O'Reilly, which was for the 50th anniversary. Mm-hmm. And I was very conscious of that actually at the time, and I knew the music for Misha Ayres so well. I mean, that record was played thousands of times, probably in our house, and but there was a curious connection in that when it came. I often write an end title song at the end of a movie. I thought about taking one of the poems from the poets of 1916, and I looked through many poems, but the one that stood out was Misha Ayres, the poem by Patrick Pearse. It's got this great simplicity and perfection, which is really magical, and it works so well to music. So it was kind of another kind of manifestation of my connection with Gael Linn, that this song, Misha Ayres, became kind of the song really of the centenary, much as the Misha Ayres documentary was the manifestation even today of the 50th anniversary.
Indeed, a very powerful song, and the music carried the words. I think maybe, Patrick, it's a good idea to ask you an easy question as we draw towards a conclusion. So here's your easy question. Have you any unfulfilled dreams? Well, the one thing I'll say about that is that I consider myself to be very fortunate, that I've been able to do something I love for my career. And of course there's many other things I want to do. I would like to write more operas and also more liturgical pieces. I've got a few things on the go at the moment that are kind of
semi-done and are just barely started in a sense. You know, but I think composing my mass and my first opera, they are real watersheds in my career personally, and I'm looking forward to next year because of the premiere of Dante, which is my first opera, and it's a curious thing in a sense. My Dante opera was a bit of a quest. It really started with an aria I wrote for the movie Hannibal, an aria called Vita Cormeum, which is a sonnet from Dante's La Vita Nuova, which was Dante's early book of poetry, and that was really the seed for the opera Dante. And I don't know where I'm going here with this, but anyway, but in any case, I've oh yes, it's a curious thing with Dante. The original intention was to have it performed in Italy, because he is Italy's great poet, but by a kind of an accident of fate, it's ended up being performed in Germany with an Irish composer. Such an Italian idea of an opera.
And it will be a big moment for you, Patrick, when your Dante opera premieres in Hof in Germany in June of next year. But it'll be a big moment also for the Irish nation that one of our own has composed this opera dedicated to the work and the life of Dante. What about tonight, tomorrow, next week? What do they hold for you, Patrick? And that's your final question.
Well, it's hard for me to think beyond Dante at the moment, and I'm going to try and get a plug in for it. I'm meeting somebody on Friday who's organising a package holiday, for people to go and see the premiere, which is on the 15th of June next year. And so they're going to organise a kind of a long weekend where they go to see maybe a ballet in Munich, and then also to see where they have the Wagner Festival, which is very close to Hof as well, and then culminating in the premiere on the 15th of June, which is a Saturday evening. And but that's the culmination of a lot of work over my whole career to be able to do this, But I am fortunate in a sense, But these were ambitions I had, and I've managed to, by the grace of God, I suppose, to get these ambitions fulfilled. And if this opera is successful, obviously I've got a second opera that I've already started.
And you'll come back and talk with us about your second opera.
I will, of course,
when that comes to fruition. So, Patrick, gur a céad maigad as teachtasteach an seo aniu ag ifig Gael Linn, pleasure amachas amach a bhí an ag Lord Slaat an seo aniu.
Gur a mí maith agat.